Hello, welcome to session 2 of Microbiology Lab. If you're watching this video, I assume that you still have not received your Benson Lab manual book. Um, I'll send you the questions as I did for the previous week, but I just wanted to go over the material that would be covered so that you can read it later, but at least you'll be able to complete the assignments. So for the first assignment, you are supposed to read the document smear preparation. So essentially, that will also tell you to read exercise 10 on smear preparations. The gist of how you make a microscope smear is that if you have a liquid that your culture is suspended in, you sterilize an inoculating loop till it's glowing red hot, either in a flame or in the tabletop incinerators that we use. Let it cool. This takes a few seconds. Let it cool entirely. Dip it into the broth, swirl it around to stir it up a bit, and then pull it back out, and without touching anything else, touch it to your slide. Recap your broth and rub the loop on the slide in little circles to rub the cells and the liquid off onto the slide. If you have solid media, such as a petri dish instead, with your culture in it, then you'll take an inoculating loop, you'll sterilize it in the same way. Then you will take 2 loopfuls of just pure deionized sterile water and put that onto your microscope slide first. Then you'll re-sterilize your loop, touch it after it cools to one of the colonies on your plate, and you want to only ever take from a colony that has nothing else touching it. If there's 2 colonies touching, pick a different one. And the reason for that is if there's 2 colonies touching, one could be the wrong species. You could have contamination and not be looking at the right thing. You also want to make sure that as you're touching the colony, that you don't disturb the whole colony. You only want to touch maybe half of the colony. You never take the whole thing, because honestly, that's more bacteria than you need for a slide anyway. And that colony can then grow back and be used for other things. Maybe you want to make a slide of that colony and test it. Well, you can't do that if you take the whole colony and put it on your slide. The reason that you add the water is because your bacteria are going to be so much more densely packed together on the solid media than they would be in the liquid. So you mix that solid amount of bacteria that's now on your loop, you mix that into those 2 drops of water or 2 loopfuls of water that are on your slide. Then from that point, the procedure is very similar from there on. Some smears you want to air dry, and some smears you want to heat fix. When you heat fix things, some things can become distorted or shrink. So depending on the kind of staining you want to do and the kind of structures you want to view, you may not want to heat fix your slide. When you are heat fixing it, there are 2 ways you could go about doing this. One would be to lay it on a hot plate for a few seconds until the liquid, any remaining liquid is driven off by the heat. Now, it should be mostly air dried before you did this anyway, but if you hear a little sizzle, you want to leave it there until it stops sizzling, but then remove it immediately. You can also pass your slide that is already air dried through the flame of a Bunsen burner. If you do that, You do not want to hold it in the flame for any length of time. You just want to pass it through quickly, because if you hold it in that flame, or if you leave the heat on the heat plate too long, we're talking about seconds, not minutes, because otherwise the whole slide could just shatter if you overheat it. You want to make sure when you're making a good smear that you don't use too much bacteria. If you can see the bacteria on your loop, you're using too much. And when I say you're using too much, what I mean is that it's going to trap the dyes of the stain, and you won't get a good clear image because it's all going to be trapped in all that material. Or it might be so thick that once it dries, you can't actually get enough light through it to see it. Or your two cells are going to be right on top of each other and blocking each other from your field of view, and it just will be blurry and unclear. So I think that I've covered everything from exercise 10 that you would need to answer those questions. Next, we move on to exercise 11. I will make a separate video for that because this gets long.